I'd like to invite the next speaker, President Johnson-Sirleaf from Liberia. She's not new to the international community. She's actually a daughter of the UN system, having spent 5 years in the UN as the regional director for the Regional Bureau for Africa. More importantly, the Sustainable Development Goals have been determined based on the report she produced about, I think it was 2011. It was a report she co-chaired with Prime Minister David Cameron and the President of Indonesia. So you, Madam, you've actually been really giving us the light to make this happen. So we are so honored to have you here. I know you've faced a number of economic challenges as a result of Ebola, et cetera, and how elegantly the region is coming back into power, economic power. So we warmly welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me also say thanks to the organizers of this event and to all of those at the high table, how pleased it is to be here with you to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. I'd like to join in the applaud for Mr. Kutesa and Ambassador Kamua of Kenya, two Africans who virtually negotiated the Sustainable Development Goals through very difficult waters. And as we are going to approve them, we hope on Friday, we want to give them a lot of credit. The Sustainable Development Goals, as you know, has 17 goals. Some of them have been mentioned by President Museveni or by the moderator, and they have 179 targets. That means that they're sufficiently diversified so that everyone can see something in it for them. I want to see how the consultative process was so expansive, and for the first time in the formulation of development goals, the private sector and civil society played key roles. And that was a strong message that as we go forward for implementation, that the private sector is expected not only to have contributed to the formulation of those goals, but expected to be a full partner in the implementation. After we got through with formulating the goals, we went to Addis Ababa, and there where we had the Addis Addis Agenda for Action, and that's supposed to be the means of implementation of the goals. And there was a departure from the previous goals when we had NEPAD, the partnership, new Partnership for Africa Development, with an attempt to try to mobilize resources from partners as a means of financing the goals and the objectives. But in the financing for development, there was something where everyone recognized mutual responsibility. Mutual responsibility suggesting that first and foremost, those in every country, it's not only Africa, but every country would first make sure that their own endowment, their own allocation had a level of efficiency so that they were able, on the basis of their endowment, to mobilize sufficient resources for their own development. But at the same time, on a mutual responsibility, we recognize that many of our countries, particularly the countries in Africa, having been exploited for so long that our resources had gone, and therefore there was that differentiated responsibility that you have to give something back. And that means looking at the whole international taxation system. Are the countries getting their fair share of the resources? Looking at illicit flows, how are they leaving the country? Those flows that could really be financing development. Those were some of the things that came out of Addis Ababa in the Financing for Development Conference that makes this agenda so much different and makes it so inclusive of all the things that you can think of. For us in Africa, it's been mentioned by President Museveni, African economies are growing at a very fast pace. I think it's been noted and recorded that we are the fastest growing region. But yet, that transformation that's called for in the SDGs is still lacking. It's lacking because, according to the latest report I saw, only 38% of Africans have access to electricity, only 10% to the internet, only a quarter of the population with good roads. There are exceptions, of course. There are a lot of diversity in Africa, whether you can be dealing with South Africa that may be far ahead, or you can be dealing with some of the more industrialized ones, whether it's Kenya or Uganda or Ghana or Ethiopia, or in fact Ethiopia is one of the fastest growing economies right now, with a major effort for industrialization, setting examples all over the continent. So the opportunities then for this transformation that we all looked for under the new agenda means that we've got to fix our infrastructure. And our whole African Union Agenda 2063 that has transformation at its basis calls for massive investment in infrastructure, whether we're dealing with power or roads or ports or telecommunication. And I believe that's where many of your opportunities will come in, because the opportunities to be able to do that as you move into my area, West Africa, there where the infrastructure deficit is so profound that we can't move, and we know that the balkanized state of our country means we must also promote regional cooperation. And that's what's now happening, to be able to have the economies of scales that major investors would look for, to be able to have the comparative advantages in certain areas recognized, but at the same time, the opening up of markets, the opening up of borders will enable us to be able to look for large-scale investment, because you can penetrate the others. And so in Liberia, we if I may come to that, Liberia is well endowed with natural resources. Whether we're dealing with iron ore, whose prices are now rock bottom, or rubber, same. But we're first starting gold. We have our first gold exports, forestry, agriculture. We too are exploring for petroleum. So, and that's not just Liberia. That's the same with all of the neighboring countries in West Africa, where they're all endowed and not up to the level of development and industrialization as we find in Southern and Eastern Africa, because of our infrastructure deficit. When you're dealing with West Africa and Central Africa, there's this major need to be able to improve roads and powers and ports and whatnot. But the opportunities are there. And so I hope that in this group, there will be those who will recognize that. I don't know where the investors in here are coming. If they're all from the U.S., then I would say to you, you're not using the opportunities that are there. You need to do more to be able to do it. China's doing it. And so where are you? You need to be there, because I think people like to see U.S. investors. People want to see diversity in the investment in their economies. And so I just hope that this particular meeting will enable some of you to reinforce your own desire to do partnership. Public-private partnership is now a major element coming out of the Addis Ababa, that no longer do we say you invest, but now we want you to be a partner either to the government itself or to local investors. So that partnership will enable us to open up more possibilities. So I just want to thank those of you who are here and say that we hope we'll see you in our country, in some country in Africa very soon. We hope before you leave here, you'll be able to meet someone and talk a deal make a deal, because if we make this new agenda work, which has poverty at its core, then what we do is to increase the purchasing power. If you increase the purchasing power, that's good business, that's good profit for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. One other point I think you might be interested in knowing, that the President is the first democratically elected woman leader in Africa. So thank you.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.